For our first video on Health Conscious Meals, I'm going to make a Tuscan bean and kale soup. So it starts out with about 5 lengths of hot Italian sausage. This is a local sausage made here. I live in Kansas City, and a friend of mine just told me that it's easier to break up the sausage, that it kind of crumbles by itself and cooks if you cook it in about 1 inch of water. And then, of course, most of us know about the mashed potato masher trick to get the meat to break up and be ground. So that's the first part. And then we're going to add an onion and 3 carrots and 3 sticks of celery. I'm going to slice and dice those. Okay, so in this bowl I've got the onions, celery, and carrots all chopped up and ready to go and put into the soup itself. It also calls for garlic. I'm going to have the recipe in the description of this video. And it's 3 cloves of garlic. So I like to use the minced garlic from Costco. It's the Kirkland brand. And I literally just scoop out what I think would be the equivalent of 3 cloves. And then just a little bit more because I like garlic. So that's that. And then I'm just going to dump this into the pot. And I'm going to do that two-handed. So I'm going to turn this off and we'll start in a second. Once the veggies are added, you just want to saute them until they're tender. So I might do a little sauteing and steaming at the same time by putting the lid back on the pot. And I might actually give it a quick stir before I do that. One of the things I love about this Tuscan bean and kale soup is the fact that it's a 1-pot soup, so it's less cleanup. And because it's 1 pot, it also makes it easier to store. Sometimes I'll make this like the day before or 2 days before, because you know with soups, when it sits for a couple days, it's a lot better. So it's easy, you know, when you literally make it, let it cool down, and then just put it in your fridge, and everything will all the flavors will absorb better that way as well. Now it's time for the main ingredient, which is kale. And we've got everything sauteed and steamed. So all the vegetables, which is the celery, carrots, garlic, and onion. And just going to add the kale. The lens is steaming because of it. And the kale is going to wilt down as it gets steamed, so you're going to want to, once you put the kale in, you're going to want to put a lid on. And I'm actually going to add some spinach as well, because I want to get some extra greens in this meal. So I'm just going to do a handful of spinach that I've washed through a colander. And what that's going to do, or what's nice about this, is that it doesn't matter if it's still wet. You don't have to use a salad spinner or anything, because obviously the moisture is going to help it steam. I'm going to add the rest of the kale and then show you the next steps. Okay, so you can see how much the kale has cooked down. I mean, when I filled the kale and the spinach in here, I mean, it was, you know, almost overflowing the pan. So that's how much it's going to cook down. It's going to cook down to about half its size. And then you just want to stir it in there. Mix it all around. One of the great things about soup is that you can mess around with it quite a bit. So, for example, the recipe calls for 1 box of chicken broth. I'm going to use vegetable broth, and it's just a box. And you can use, you know, low sodium, organic, This is actually one from Trader Joe's, and this is the non-low sodium one, so it's their hearty vegetable broth. And I usually get the low sodium one, but they're out. And then the recipe also calls for a can of tomatoes. So I'm using organic diced tomatoes by Del Monte, and there's no need to drain it. You want that extra liquid. The recipe does say to add 2 cups of water. So what I like to do is fill the tomato can with water so not to dirty another dish, and it helps me rinse it out for recycling as well, and just dump that in there. Furthermore, the recipe calls for a can of pinto beans and a can of Great Northern beans. I like to dump those into a strainer because somebody once told me that the juice that beans soak in can cause a lot of gas, and so I find that if I rinse them off before I put them in a recipe, then I have more success with not having a lot of gas. You can, of course, just dump them in with all the liquid as well. I've had the soup done by a friend of mine like that, so that is entirely possible. And then you just want to, mix it around so everything mixes together. I got a little bit of cauliflower in there as well from another recipe that I'm doing at the same time as this one, and you know what, that is not going to matter. This is a great soup. You can throw tons of different stuff in it. For seasoning, you can either use fresh herbs or dried herbs. I'm going to use Italian seasoning today, and I literally just fill the top of the seasoning jar and dump that in there, and then I'll mix that around. So I've added the salt and the pepper as well as the herbs, and the salt and pepper is just to taste, and I'm going to mix those in. So now it's all mixed together. I'm going to put the lid on the pot, and then I'm going to turn the heat to high. And then once the heat is on high, I'm going to wait till it's simmering, boiling, and then I'm going to reduce it to a simmer, and I'll show you how to do that. Alright, so this big pot is now boiling, and what I'm going to do is stir it really quick, but I'm going to reduce it down to low, and then I'm going to give it a stir so that all those flavors mix up. And like I said, I love this meal because it's a one-pot meal. It's got so many good stuff, so many good ingredients in there. You've got your beans, 2 kinds of beans, Italian sausage, kale, carrots, tomatoes, onions, celery, garlic, all sorts of spices. Not to mention, this tastes incredible. I have not met a male or female that dislikes this. Once you've reduced it down to a simmer, you're going to want to let it cook for about half an hour. And you're going to want to make sure that it's cool enough before you serve it to anyone as well.